But yeah, thanks everyone for joining us today. We have a good show about private label and some mistakes that you can avoid. If you don't mind just hitting that tweet out button or Facebook share, that's always great. And then if you're watching this on YouTube, we appreciate if you can just give us a thumbs up and then leave a comment about what you liked or you didn't like about the show. And for anyone that didn't catch it recently, we just last Sunday night did a really great webinar. We had over 200 people on it. We talked about a way that you can do private label research. We went into depth. There was some really good actionable tips and tricks that you could do. We looked at the Jungle Scout web app specifically, and we basically just spent a good hour going through tips and tricks that you can do with that web app. We found it to be really helpful. We had really positive feedback on it, and then we spent quite a bit of time just answering private label specific questions. We also talked about our Jumpstart program, which helps new Amazon sellers and Amazon sellers that are looking to get into private label and other areas of selling. So check that webinar out. It's on slamazonbros.com. You can also find it on YouTube. It's a really great webinar, and we think it'll be really helpful. So look at that. And then right now, we're going to give you 7 private label tips or really mistakes for you to avoid. So hopefully if you're in private label, you haven't made one of these mistakes, even though most are common mistakes. So many people that are in private label have at least made one of these mistakes. But if you haven't started private label yet, watch this and then avoid these mistakes. Let other people make these mistakes. Andy, get into it. Give us a couple mistakes to avoid when doing private label, and then just real briefly, maybe do a minute of how long you've been private labeling, and for anyone that hasn't heard that yet.
Okay, sure. So why don't you want to do it like do every other? So I was at CrossFit last week, and so at CrossFit they have this thing called the WOD at the end of the workout, where basically for like 20 minutes you're just constantly moving. And this was a partner one, and so the way we did it is we had to do 50 burpees, which if you guys are in the chat, if you've ever done a burpee, they are like the worst. They seem like the easiest thing to do, right? Just to stand up, right, and then get back down. But you're ready to barf after doing like 15 first. 15 in a row. So we did a partner one. So my partner would do one, and then I would do one, and then he would do one. So why don't we do that way today, Nate? So I'll give a mistake, and then you give a mistake.
Sure.
So yeah, for those of you who don't know us, I've been an Amazon seller for 3 years. First, about a year and a half, I was mainly doing online sourcing, retail sourcing, and a little bit of wholesale, and then really moved into private label. And so private label now makes up about 95% of my sales and of my business. It's a model that I really believe in. I think there's tremendous potential there, and I think the market is really just getting started as far as selling private label products online. So that's a little bit who I am. So without further ado, I'll do like a Gary V. Let's get into the show. All right, so here we go. So here's one of the first mistakes that I see a lot of people who get into private labeling make. When you source a product, and I get all of my products from China and from India, one of the very important, super important pieces of the process is you have to get samples from the manufacturers that you're talking with. If you fail to get those samples, you could potentially make a really big mistake, all right? And I'll share with you quickly a mistake that I made. So I import poly bags. If you're an Amazon seller, you know that a lot of the stuff that we send in, FBA has to be poly bagged. And so I recognized early on that there was a pretty strong market for poly bags. So I contacted a manufacturer. They sent me a sample, and this is what I failed to do. I failed to get my measuring tape out, and I failed to really look over that sample properly. I was too excited about the margins, right? Because I was able to get them for really cheap, and I was still able to sell mine at the time were the lowest price 400 pack poly bag bundles on Amazon, and I was making really good money off of them. And so I hurried the process. I got my main thing I was thinking about when I got that sample. I just wanted it to be strong, right? So I opened it up and I was, stuffing my hand in it, make sure there wasn't a hole in it, just checking it out that way. But then I failed to get my measuring tape out. And so I said to the manufacturer before I got my measuring tape out, I said, go ahead, send it. I gave him my 30% and said, go ahead and make the large order, right? Well, the large order was shipped. It had to be shipped by boat because poly bags are extremely heavy. You can't ship those by air. Got them to my house. And when they all landed, it kind of dawned on me, you know what? I never measured those boogers, and all the excitement or whatever. This was one of my first products that I private labeled. So sure enough, I got my measuring tape out and the doggone things were shorter than they were supposed to be. So then I went to my sample and I checked my sample because I thought, did they make the sample right? But then the large order, was it wrong? And you know what? They were right. It was my fault. I didn't measure the sample properly. Therefore, it was all on me. If I would have measured that sample properly, I could have contacted the manufacturer before they started making, the actual size and the large shipment. And I could have stopped the whole process right there and everything would have been all right. And so that's a key mistake that a lot of people make. They don't vet the sample properly. You've now learned from me. So when you get that sample, make sure you fall absolutely in love with it. And it is exactly what you want. All right. So that's one mistake to avoid.
And Andy, still going on yours, would you say, because I feel like I can, most people hear about the samples as they're getting a private label and they know because we drill it into them and other people drill it into them, how important samples are. Do you feel the tendency once you, get in the private label and do multiple, products bring in that the second or maybe the fourth or fifth product you're bringing over, you're kind of like, the sample doesn't matter as much. I mean, that sounds like that's kind of what happened there that time. Like if that was your first product ever, you probably would have been more careful to measure it, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it's just like, that's just part of the process. Whenever you work, even if you're working with the same manufacturer, but you're getting a different product, you can never trust that product is going to be good like the first one.
Yeah, so you can't get complacent with it either, even if you're...
Yeah. I'm Nate. I'm going to let you take over. I'm actually getting a call from my freight forwarder, Ray. You see that from Worldwide Express? I have a 20-foot container that's being dropped today.
Well...
And so I'm going to let you go ahead and go do the next ones, and I'm just going to mute it while I talk to Ray. All right?
Okay, well, hey, private label comes first, right?
Right.
So I'll give a couple here then if you don't come back in time. All right, so the next one I'm going to talk about is not to receive... people get in the private label and they don't realize that they're not receiving the lowest price for their private label items that they possibly could. So there's a couple of troubles when you're working with overseas suppliers, especially if you're working with people on Alibaba. One, there's a little bit of a language barrier there, possibly. Some manufacturers or contact reps are better than others. So sometimes there's a language barrier there. Communication can be a little slow. So sometimes you're going back and forth for like weeks and weeks with your manufacturer, and it can kind of seem to drag on, and you kind of almost forget what you're talking about. Sometimes you have to go back and read through your hundreds of messages if you're emailing, or if you're talking on Skype, it can even, seem like a lot. And then, people don't, so there's that language barrier there. It can be tough to negotiate. And then people just don't negotiate as well as they should. And so they end up paying more for a product than they really should. So if you're trying to compete with another product and, you're paying $5 per unit for it, and your competitor's getting it for $4.50, that small difference there really adds up and makes a difference. So not getting the lowest price that you possibly can is really a big mistake that people fall into. And so they ask, well, how do I make sure I get the lowest price? You have to use the negotiation tactics that we talk about a lot. We go through that a lot in our program, how to negotiate effectively. And then you also just have to make sure that you're getting your products from the end manufacturer or the initial manufacturer. So what a lot of people don't realize is there's manufacturers or listings on Alibaba that aren't the initial manufacturer of the product. You're actually going through a middleman. So it's almost like you're doing wholesale. You can still put your own logo and brand on the product, but all that's happening is there's a middleman that you're buying your product from, and he's actually getting it from another supplier just for cheaper. So he's getting it for $3 and he's selling it to you for $4.50, and he's making the $1.50 difference. So you have to watch out for that. A lot of people don't realize that, and it's because they don't do enough research. And there's services out there. Andy has a contact that's in China and that can actually find the lowest price for you so that you don't have to do all that research. But a lot of people are buying through a middleman, and it's basically just another business that's opened up because a lot of people overseas know that people in the US are sourcing for products on Alibaba, so they decided to kind of become the middleman. So you have to watch out for that. There's been a lot of people who kind of realize after buying their product that they could have got it cheaper, but they went through a middleman. That's the beauty of private label is we're trying to cut out the middleman basically, or as much as we can, and get our products from the manufacturer directly to Amazon. So that's the second one. Make sure you're getting the lowest price possible by negotiating well and making sure you're dealing with the initial manufacturer, not going through a middleman there. And I'll go to a third one while Andy, anyone who's just joining us, Andy is talking to his freight forwarder. So his private label products come first. Like we always tell everyone, Andy helps people learn how to private label, but he also still every day is dealing with his own private label products, finding new products and importing them. And he's on a call with his freight forwarder right now, getting that worked out. So I'll go to a third one here while Andy finishes that call up. And I'll say that a mistake that people run into with private label is they don't create good listing pages. So this is really important. Anyone who's been selling for a decent amount of time on Amazon knows how important listing pages are. They know that the customer comes and they see your listing page, and that's really your sales page. You have to get the customer on the listing page. But why don't people really take the time, or why don't they make good listing pages? Well, creating a listing page can be difficult. It's a little tricky if it's your first couple times, especially. And Amazon doesn't exactly make the product listing process the easiest. They could, in my opinion, they could make it easier to list products on Amazon. They've improved it in some ways, but they could make it easier. So some people just don't know how to make good product pages. I think that's the first, thing people run into, especially when making parent-child listings. That can be a little more difficult. So I do understand when people run into issues with that. So one, they might not know how, but two, I think people just get lazy with it. I know I can kind of run into this, especially if it's a couple private label products in. I might be like, oh, another product listing page. They slack on the photos, they slack on the bullet points, they slack on the product description. But that's so important. Your photos are, we can't stress enough how important good photos are when you're private labeling, because that's what people can't touch your product. They have to see your product. They have to see those photos. Utilize all the photo spots that Amazon gives you and make good product pages. One of the tips that we just went through in that webinar on Sunday was you can look for listings that are not, that don't have good product pages, and basically just bring the same product to market, but out hustle them with a good product page, and then beat out their product, get the market share just because you have a better product page. So that's the third thing. A mistake to avoid is not making a good product page. Andy, I don't know if you're back. Do you want to go ahead and jump in on one of yours? Unmute yourself and.
Okay, yep. Hold on one second. So I'm talking to my freight forwarder.
You still are?
Yeah, they just dropped off a 20-foot pallet.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I'll go through with the next.
Okay, go ahead.
Next one if you want.
Yep.
Yeah, and then I'll be done though, so you might have to jump back on if you can. So Andy's finishing up his giant pallet, 20-foot pallet. He just got dropped, container that he got dropped off. Talking to his freight forwarder. And yeah, reseller conference says good pics sell for sure. Pictures are so important. Yeah, we can't stress that enough. The fourth one here, a mistake to avoid with private label. A fourth mistake really is that people don't get started. So this sounds so simple, but they hear about some of these mistakes to avoid that we're going through today, and they kind of get paralysis or analysis paralysis, and they just decide, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to keep watching and reading, but private label is too scary, so I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to, watch from behind the scenes and never get started. So this happened to me for a while. I saw Andy for a good year having success with private label. He was all in, and he had converted most of his product research to private label. And I was kind of like, I'm good with my retail arbitrage and online arbitrage and wholesale. I'm not going to do that. And I kind of just sat behind the scenes. I was in his course and I was watching what he was doing. And I, knew that I could do the same thing. And I even have him as a resource to help me. But I kind of just sat back and I didn't get started. And of course, once I did get started, I was kicking myself for not starting a year before that time, just because you kind of get analysis paralysis. You don't really know what you're getting into, and you just get afraid. So a mistake that people do in the private label process is they never take that first step, which is just getting started. So, most people will say it's better to make mistakes and to learn than to never try at all. There's so many quotes to that effect. But what we're telling you is that here are some of the mistakes. You can avoid them so you don't have an excuse not to get started. If you never get started, you're not going to be able to reap the rewards of everything that we're talking about basically here, because this is a model that does work. And even though there's mistakes that you have to avoid, there's much more success to be obtained. And that's why we like to give out these mistakes, just so that you can avoid some of these hurdles that people, commonly find in private label. I know that I've done some of these mistakes. Like some of my product listing pages haven't been as good. And the good thing about a product listing page is you can go back and fix it. But we always recommend that you have a good product listing page before you try to launch your product, because you want to capture those customers and the market share right away. You don't want to wait and have an unsuccessful launch. You want to capture that market share right away. And that's why that's so important. And the same thing with making sure that you have good samples and making sure that you're receiving the lowest price. So the first one was make sure that you get really good samples, that Andy said. My one, number 2, was make sure you're getting the lowest price, negotiating well, and buying directly from whoever's making the product. Number 3, make sure you're making good product pages. And 4, just get started, because it's so important to get started. Andy, are you good to go on number 5 here?
I am. All right, so I'm back. Sorry, I'm dealing with my freight forward. I have a 20-foot container that's being dropped today at my prep and pack center. And so I'll just add this is like a bonus, one that I'm learning today. I have 3 items from 3 different manufacturers. It's in a 20-foot container, so the container only had my items in it. And my manufacturers apparently did not palletize the product. And so the shipping companies, they were all a product that was picked up by a shipping company that my freight forward contracted. And so apparently they just put all the units, they're in boxes. They just stuffed them all in the 20-foot container. And so the trucking company gets to the prep and pack center, and they have to drop the container because my prep and pack center doesn't have the manpower right now to unload it, and it has to be unloaded within 2 hours. So anyway, I just had a $400 learning experience, because now the truck company has to go back to Boston, and then they're going to have to come back another day to pick up the container, which they'll charge me $400 for. And so the moral of the story is, if you have a container, a 40-foot container or a 20-foot container, make sure your product gets palletized, so that way they can remove it and load it easily. So now, at the prep and pack company, it's going to take 5 guys unloading that stuff box by box, which is a pain in the butt. Go ahead.
Not only that, Andy, I'll add to that. If you go to Amazon, you can actually look at their specific requirements for the pallets, because Amazon likes the pallets to be a certain way. They don't want them to be all splintered and broken up, which seems obvious, but if you're not real clear with your manufacturers, they can use reuse pallets that aren't up to the standard. So go to the Amazon website and read about the pallets and the LTL shipping, and Amazon tells you specifically how they like their pallets to be. But yeah, that's always fun to have that type of learning curve there.
Luckily, because I had filled up a full 20-foot container, so I saved a bunch on shipping. But that's just part of the process, right, of importing. You're going to have hiccups like that, unplanned expenses. But again, when you import by boat, you save a ton of money, so much more than if you're trying to bring stuff over by air. So even though I'll have to eat that $400, my margins are still going to be so much better than if I were to try to ship that by air. So we're actually giving you 8 mistakes to avoid. That's a bonus one. All right, so let's go to the next one. A mistake I see a lot of people make is they import counterfeit products. If you go to Alibaba, right, you can bring up product after product that has a name brand on it. And I know Alibaba says they're trying to clean up, their marketplace from counterfeiters, but it seems like as soon as they clean up one, another one will pop up. And so, this is one that I constantly am telling people to make sure, if you see a product on there and it has Nike on it, or it has a name brand kitchen item, Don't get excited and think that, you're getting something that's 75% off, what the normal retail price would be, because you're not. It is a counterfeit product. And what happens a lot of times, it'll happen with trending products. So like a product that just immediately becomes hot, right? Somehow that'll then get on Alibaba, because there'll be manufacturers on there who are advertising, and usually they're newer manufacturers. Do not buy anything that is name brand off of Alibaba. That's a huge mistake people make. You want to stay away from it, because you'll get in a lot of trouble, probably get your Amazon account shut down, and you could be in a lot of legal trouble as well. So definitely stay away from that. Another mistake that I see a lot of people make is they fail to get a customs agent up front when they're either doing boat shipments or they're doing air shipments. And so this is another cost of doing business. This is what I tell all new people to do, that once you really discover, like, hey, look, this is a business model that I want to make as a cornerstone of my business. What I tell people is find a customs agent. What it'll cost you, if you want to import as much as you want, as many times, it'll cost you about $400 to get what's called a customs bond. And that custom agent will get that for you. But if you fail to get a customs agent, and I've seen this time and time again, people get excited. They want to hurry up and get their product here. They don't think they need a customs agent. And so they'll begin to ship by boat and even sometimes by air. And then their goods get stuck in customs because the proper paperwork wasn't filled out. And you need a customs agent to know what paperwork needs to be filled out, as well as you need a customs agent that could alert you to potential disastrous products. And so there's some products that are like FDA certified. You can't bring them in unless certain FDA paperwork is filled out. You or I are not going to know that. However, there is a $6 billion, that's with a B, there is a $6 billion freight forwarding and customs agent industry who know how to handle all that. And so, my thing is, if you're going to import product, just be upfront, get a customs agent right away. You can Google it. There's generally going to be some that are local to your community. I use one that's right out of Philadelphia, and they handle everything. And so all I do now is when I have my product from my manufacturer that's ready to be picked up, I just turn my manufacturer information over to my custom agent freight forwarder, and they do everything from then on out. I don't have to do nothing. And so it makes it really easy. But the downside is if you don't get one, you could end up bringing potential product over that you can't even import into the U.S. Listen, I know a story of somebody who imported a large amount. It got stuck in customs, and they had to send the whole thing back all the way to China because he didn't have his customs agent right from the beginning. And so that's a huge mistake that some people make. You don't want to make that mistake. Once you realize you want to do this, my suggestion is spend a little bit of money and get a customs agent. Get the professional to handle that piece. Otherwise, it could end up costing you a lot. All right. So I believe that's number 7. And we're already to number 8, 2:25. Good. So we're right on time. We always like to keep these under a half hour. Those of you that are joining us, if you haven't been in the chat room, I just want to say it again. Nate and I are releasing a course. It closes actually this Sunday, but we would love to have you part of it. We teach basically all of the methods that we've used to find product, right? The number one question that people always ask is, where do you find product? And so we developed a course where that's the main answer to that question. This course really covers how to find profitable product. And we do it 3 ways. We do it through online sourcing. We do it through retail sourcing, wholesale sourcing, and then the meat of it is through sourcing private label products. And so if that interests you at all, go to Slamazon Bros, check it out. We're only leaving it open though till Sunday. All right, so here's number 8. Number 8 is this, a mistake that happens every day. And you guys, mark my words, you can take this to the bank. This mistake happens every day. When you get your product into the Amazon warehouse, people set up their promo codes wrong, and they lose their entire inventory in 2 hours. And so I've talked to a customer service rep who deals specifically with this issue, and he says every day they are receiving phone calls from Amazon sellers who set up their promo codes improperly and lose their entire inventory. And so that is a mistake that you do not want to make. And so when you get to that point, to that step in the process, make sure you know exactly how to set up a promo code, because the way Amazon has you set it up through Seller Central, it is really tricky. There's this little box that you have to uncheck. And if you fail to uncheck that little box, your promo code gets displayed publicly on your listing. And what happens is then people get that and it goes viral. They'll start sending it to Fat Wallet, to Slick Deals, to all the deal sites, and you will lose your inventory in a second. And when I say a second, they'll burn through 1,000 units like within 15 minutes. So make sure you do not want to make that mistake. Know and understand how to set up promo codes correctly. So that was number 8. I'll hand it back to you, Nate.
Well, that was good. And like you said, I think we're almost done with time here. So I think that was some good tips to avoid. If you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, man, I'm not even at this level. I don't even really know what private label products are still. That means that you definitely want to check out our other YouTube videos that we have. You want to go to slamazonbros.com and you want to check out the Jumpstart program that takes you, like Andy was just saying, through the entire private label process from start to end, and also includes a private community group that we have that's going to help you every step of the way along the way. So we're really excited for that program. It's going to be really good for anyone that's brand new to Amazon, if you don't even have an account yet, an Amazon account, or to anyone that's currently selling and wants to get into a new area like private label. So we're excited for that. Someone just said they missed the 7. We're going to have this recording available on YouTube in just a few hours for you. So go to the Slamazon Bros Facebook group, join up there, or go to slamazonbros.com where you can catch all our weekly videos. Just go to the Slamazon Bros live section. So that's going to do it today. Andy still talked with this freight forwarder. Anyone that didn't hear, he just had a $400 mistake, and he gave that tip earlier on how to avoid that. So you're going to want to make sure that you go back and listen to that as well. That's going to do it for us today. We're going to see you again next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Anyone that's interested. And then also the Slamazon Bros Jumpstart course closes this Sunday, February 28th. So check that out and go to slamazonbros.com to see any updated information. Thanks for everyone who joined us live. And we'll see you in the Slamazon Bros Facebook group. Thanks, guys.